Formula One. It's a sport often seen as insular and elitist, but it's seen a meteoric rise under its owners Liberty Media, not only in popularity and viewership, but in the ability to almost print money. From greater access to more races, here's how it happened. For decades, Formula One was owned and run by one man, Bernie Ecclestone. He was old school, someone who thought the sport itself was enough, and there was no need for all this modern marketing and social media nonsense. But in 2016, Ecclestone agreed to sell his baby to American group Liberty Media. It cost Liberty Media $4.4 billion, and they quickly got to work. We got an F1 app almost immediately, and teams were allowed to show us more from behind the scenes. One of Liberty's most important deals was with Netflix, which in 2019 brought us Drive to Survive. The effect? An almost 70% rise in viewership for races in the US alone. It's massively benefited Formula One online too, with a rise from 7.8 million followers across its social media platforms in 2016 to around 50 million today. New eyes are on the sport too, with F1's own subscription TV channel, which people can watch anywhere in the world. But the main market they've tapped into is the US. There's now 3 races there a year, in Texas, Miami and Las Vegas, and an American-branded team, Cadillac, getting involved in the sport too. More races seems to be the direction of travel. A street circuit in Madrid's being welcomed onto the calendar, while conversations around a Grand Prix in Africa have ramped up in the last few years. More big events could be in the offing too, after the massive F1 75 season launch event in London in 2025. 7.5 million people tuned in to watch it live across the social media channels, and that doesn't include the viewing figures for where it was broadcast on TV in certain countries. It seems Liberty will do whatever they can to grow the F1 brand. Their efforts have been worthwhile too, with Forbes valuing the sport at $17.1 billion back in 2023, almost 4 times more than what they bought it for in 2016. Not bad, considering it's seen as a sport where people just drive around in circles.
Good evening, guten Abend, bienvenue, falcha one and all to your Sunday night fix. That's the word I like to use of football from around the world, Europe, South America, and with the World Cup qualifiers in full swing tonight, Africa and beyond. I'm Danny Kelly. This is Trans Europe Express. It wouldn't be that without the presence of Andy Brassell, but luckily he is here, just 2 weeks away now till the radio first of us both doing it from my house in Ireland. What could possibly go wrong? For tonight, though, we've got all the major stories from across the continent. We'll be getting the amazing story of how UEFA have approved both Spanish and Italian fixtures. We've played in places far beyond the boundaries of Europe. We'll be bringing you all the latest from the international games. There'll be Mbappe watch. There will be Tim Vickery on the South American aspect, and Andy will bring us a team focus on FC Schalke. For so long, that gigantic club in the doldrums, now second in the Bundesliga. It's going to be an absolute rush tonight, so we're very glad that you're along for the ride. Me, Danny Kelly, him, Andy Brassell, you, the listening millions, and Trans Europe Express. It is 2 generations since I used to work on Radio 1, the BBC pop music station, but I haven't lost that ability to know where the chorus is going to say the words you want, and you've got to speed your voice up to get out so that I say Trans Europe Express and then they say Trans Europe Express. You could easily crash that and look like a right amateur. Andy, hello, how are you?
Hello, Danny. I'm very well. Very nice to hear the familiar theme tune as well. Just to note as well, at Bohemians versus Schalke that I was at in Dublin yesterday, hence we're doing our bit on Schalke yesterday. They did welcome the visitors by not only serving currywurst at the concession stand, but by playing the model by Kraftwerk in between Thin Lizzy and Kneecap, which was pretty good.
Fantastic, fantastic. Andy, I know there are games going on in Africa as well at the moment, but there are 4 games going on currently in the European stages of the World Cup qualifiers. Do you want to give us the latest from those? I've got the game between Denmark and Greece on my screen here. The latest from that is it's Denmark 3, Greece 1. And this is a fantastic result for Scotland, because if this result holds, it means Scotland at the very least have got a place in the playoffs, because Greece will, although Greece have just pulled 1 goal back. In the protesting about it, Kasper Schmeichel's been booked. But if Denmark can win this game, and they are 3-1 up after an hour, then Scotland will have a place at least in the playoffs, and how they get on against Denmark will decide, I guess, whether they're going directly into the World Cup. But there are other games as well, Andy.
Yeah, and a potentially exciting end to this, because we've just had Ioannidis, of course, recently signed for Sporting, pull one back for Greece. But yeah, a bit of a square up between him and Kasper Schmeichel after that, as he tried to get the ball back. Of course, there's still 25 minutes left in this, so maybe Greece are thinking they can mount the sort of comeback that Scotland did against them at Hampden Park. But yeah, most of the big games that we've had were earlier. So we had the Netherlands running over Finland quite easily, which we'll see in a little bit. Croatia, of course, coasting against Gibraltar as we would expect.
Yeah, and in the Habsburg derby, it remains a half-time Romania 0, Austria 0. That's one for A-level history students there.
Yes.
Poland are winning in Lithuania, as you would expect as well. Andy, let's start, though, tonight's programme with a story. Let me just let's start by muting my phone, shall we? That's always a good thing. And let's start, Andy, with the extraordinary, not just the fact of it, but the way it was announced. During the week, UEFA sent out a press release to one and all, and it started with the headline, UEFA remains absolutely opposed to league games being played outside of Europe. And then the rest of the press release showed how they had demonstrated this implacable opposition by saying, except for the following games, which will be happening outside of Europe. Tell us about those matches. It was farcical. It was farcical.
There's a bit of "and yet" in the statement, isn't there? And it's almost as if, well, it was being sold as if releasing the pressure valve of giving into this for a couple of occasions would just make it go away forever. So, of course, the two that have been expected to be played abroad for a while were one from La Liga, which is Villarreal against Barcelona, which will be played in Miami on the weekend of December 20th. And then after Christmas into February, in Perth, Western Australia, just to point out, it's not Scotland, Western Australia. That will be Milan versus Como. Now, the reason that this has been sold is, of course, the La Liga thing has been coming for a really long time. You could argue that so has the Serie A one, because, of course, they've been playing Super Cups outside not just Italy, but outside Europe sporadically for 25 years now. Go back to the relationship between Colonel Gaddafi and Juventus, and that led to Super Copas being played in Tripoli, of course. Now, Western Australia is a bit of a step further. The reason that's been given for this is that the San Siro is unavailable that weekend because it's staging the opening of the Winter Olympics. I mean, I don't want to say anything like, well, maybe, postpone it. Move it to another ground.
Oh, Andy, of course, Juventus. Are there any big football stadiums in northern Italy where they could play? I don't think there are there? They have to go to Western Australia.
Of course, Danny. Juventus have played to great success in the past when they were at the Delle Alpi, which no one really liked before it was knocked down and rebuilt. And Juventus did really well playing at the San Siro, but I guess that's something that's not been considered. There are different reasons for this. Now, of course, I think our first stop when we talk about this has to be the fans,
the supporters, of course.
On one hand, you can see exactly why these markets have been picked. Because if we're talking about, and it's all about, if we're going to use the ugly modern terminology, it's all about not just about making the money from the gate receipts. It's about commercial partnerships and activations, as they call them nowadays. So putting up a load of other pop-up events around that to try and expand the brand, keep up with the Premier League. The Premier League is always the bogeyman that's blamed for all this. And I fail to see how, one game abroad is really going to change that. Of course, it's not going to be just one game abroad, despite what the statement from UEFA might claim or might hope. That's clearly not going to be the case. Now, they're coming from different angles because, of course, with La Liga, in recent times, this has been squarely aimed to be the end game. So if we go back, 6-7 years now, you had Relevant Sports, who of course now have a marketing partnership with UEFA, being refused permission to take Girona versus Atletico out to Miami. And now we end up with Villarreal and Barcelona in Miami. Which is something that you can understand it from the commercial perspective because, of course, there's huge Hispanic population there. That is always seen as the in to football to the United States, although there are much bigger aims with that before with the World Cup and what already happened with the Club World Cup and all the rest of it. And a lot has been said about World Cup pricing over the last couple of days, which I think is something we'll come back to, and maybe we'll mention with Tim as well, because it's not massively supporter friendly, to say the least. Let's put it that way. Now, I feel that just as Girona were a sort of easy target for this, so will Villarreal mainly, because of course they're a familiar name from European competition, a European title winner when they beat Manchester United in the Europa League final. But if we go back a couple of decades, a small club that has been brought to prominence by the backing of Fernando Roig, the tile magnate. And I think that really says a lot. And the way that Villarreal have approached this, as I said, I think a lot of the lexicon used and a lot of the promises made are comparable to when Wimbledon went to Milton Keynes. And there was a feeling that, okay, well, it's a relatively small fan base, we'll get away with it. And Fernando Roig has said, anyone who wants to go from our season ticket holders, anyone who wants to go to this game in Miami, we're terribly sorry for the inconvenience, but if you want to go, we'll pay for you. And if you don't want to go, we'll give you a 20% rebate on your season ticket, which shows you exactly what it's all about, understanding the price of everything and the value of nothing, really. Andy,
sorry to interrupt, but just for for the handful of listeners who are watching this on TV or other visual devices, I've prepared an explanatory document. I'm holding it up now to the camera, and as you can see, I have drawn a wedge, and at one end is the thin end. I'm sorry, radio listeners, but I'm holding up a triangle that I've drawn with the word wedge on it, and at one end, pointing to the pointy end, the thin end, because that's all this is. This is the thin end of a wedge that UEFA are going to lose control of instanter, because once the principle's established, then why wouldn't any club say, well, anything now that they refused permission for is a restraint of trade. That'll be straight into the courts, I guarantee you. And you talked about the effect on fans, and clearly those people who've got to pay a load of money to go, or people who've got just very proud that they've seen every game for the past 20 years, whatever it is. But the effect on the players, Andy, I keep saying that we must be coming near the point of a player revolt. In the middle of the season, and maybe, I don't know what term the schedule for Milan or Villarreal are with regards to European ties, you fly to America or Western Australia, and then you come back and play the next league game or a European game. Look, I understand that was it Rabiot? Adrian Rabiot said, used the word nuts about this.
Yeah, he did. And he was backed up, actually, in the France press conference. Of course, they're playing in Iceland tomorrow, by another of the senior France players and his club mate, the Milan goalkeeper, Mike Maignan.
A very influential figure, of course, in that dressing room with France, where some of these players will be hearing this going, what?
Yeah, I think this is it. It's not just players speaking up; it's players who other players listen to speaking up, which I think is worth really underlining. You know, these are people who are not the loudest, but they're big voices, and when they speak, it matters. Now, I think it was interesting because Rabiot was told earlier in the week by the president of the Italian FA to show a bit more respect to his employers off the back to what he said to that. And then Maignan has followed that up by backing him 100% unequivocally, not saying we understand it from a commercial perspective, but sitting there and saying, look, it seems like football's all about money today, but it shouldn't be. Yeah. And it needed a player to come out and say that. And I think the way that Maignan approached it was not only smart, but sensitive, because the way he framed it was really from the fans' perspective. I mean, look, there will be loads of fans out there going, oh, these players shouldn't be talking about fatigue. They should suck it up. They get paid loads of money.
I don't believe that anymore, Andy. I think that's an attitude that's left over.
There will always be fans who think that. Most fans should think, how does this affect the quality of what I pay for? And I think hopefully more and more fans are coming around to that. It shouldn't be us and them, because if that's the case, we're picking the wrong us and we're picking the wrong them.
Very, very quickly, before when we were talking about this and other matters, I told you that nowadays when I sit down in front of the television and let me just go through, I've got a list of every person on the planet here, 8.5 billion. Nobody likes football more than me. I've just checked. And if there's 5 games, I can, by various platforms allow me to see 5 games. The question I ask myself now is this a football match, or is it a commercial operation, or is it just some kind of revenue-raising television opportunity? I'll always watch the football match. And if that means I watch Wimbledon against Doncaster instead of some made-up tournament which one of the authorities have put together in order to enhance their televisual revenues, I'll watch Wimbledon. And you know what a sacrifice that is, Andy. Look, there's going to be a lot more on this story, and as I say, if you presumably talkSPORT we're putting on social media, as once again I put up my very, very important explanatory document about exactly what's going on with the thin end of the wedge. We'll probably calm down next, because we're going to talk about some of the teams who've been in action and who might be having a big effect on the upcoming World Cup in the United States, Mexico and Canada. We'll start with Portugal and Spain. You'll listen to Andy Brassell, me, Danny Kelly, here on Trans-Europe Express. Yeah, big games going on in the qualifiers in Europe, Andy, and everyone listening. Poland have got a second in Lithuania. They go 2-0 up. Unsurprisingly, the goals being scored by their two best players, Szymanski in the first half, and now Lewandowski has added to his giant pile of international goals. There's been and Croatia are struggling a little bit. I think it's fair to say if the scoreline is anything to go by, they're 1-0 up against Gibraltar. Their goal scorer, and this is when you're on the radio, you have to be very careful with the name of Tony Fruck. Tony Fruck has scored their goal to make it 1-0 to Croatia, which takes us, Andy. Let me tell you about our poll. As we're majoring on the World Cup tonight, the poll is rather. Forgive us, we put, if not England, which team is currently the favourite to win the World Cup next summer? So we're talking betting without England, and you can vote for Argentina, France, Spain, or other. I imagine other covers a whole lot of very good teams. Argentina, France, Spain, or other. It's on X/Twitter. So you can go and vote at talkSPORT, at Danny Kelly Words, or at Andy Brassell, 2 S's and 2 L's. Scottish fans, hold on to your hats. No. Greece haven't scored again, but my goodness, they're done everything but score. And they're starting now to run up incredible possession and shot stats against the Denmark side, who still lead by 3-1. So, Andy, let's start then talking about one of the teams that I think are definitely in the running for the World Cup is Portugal. They played the Republic of Ireland in Lisbon last night. I watched the game partially because I want to see how the Republic of Ireland were getting on. And I watched Portugal, the jeweler's eyepiece, because I think they're an amazing squad of players, because they really are. It was 1-0 to Portugal. The goal came very, very, very late in the piece. Ruben Neves, who's played a lot of games for Portugal, scored his first ever goal for Portugal. And with a header, after Ireland had put up a really, really tough and brave display of defending. I will say it is extraordinary to watch Portugal, just the players they've got in the team, the players they've got on the bench. Your theory that Nuno Mendes is the best left-back in the world was definitely backed up, Andy, by Portugal's performance. He was their most threatening player, albeit he was playing against poor old Seamus Coleman at 37 years of age and hardly ever getting a game in the Premier League. I think that helped him. It was instructive too to watch the fact that Portugal do not put on a full press, because Cristiano Ronaldo can't do that. They can't. But what they did in them was the old-fashioned shuttles, where you shuttle between the ball carriers rather than trying to close them down. And Bruno Fernandes must have run 15 kilometres in the course of the game because he was doing the running for his captain. Kevin Kelleher saved a penalty from CR7, although I thought he hit his leg. But I think the last 3 penalties he saved for the Republic have been from Mbappe, Messi, and our friend Cristiano Ronaldo. My question to you, Andy, is watching Portugal last night with the extraordinary breadth and depth of talent they have, whether Martinez is in danger of going down the same route he did with Belgium, where he doesn't quite get the sum of all the parts to click often enough to go through a tournament.
You know what? I think his record in qualifiers has been so impeccable.
It has
it's
been,
really,
no question.
It's really difficult to find fault. It's also difficult to find meaning, as England can tell you. I think,
Yes,
what does it
fair.
really mean when you get to the tournament? And I think we can separate Portugal, for example, in the qualifiers for the Euros, in which they're absolutely peerless, and the Euros themselves, in which they were not. Now, look, I think a lot of that has to come down to what sort of condition the players arrive in.
That's
and
very fair.
I guess, as you said, so much of what Portugal are able to do relies on the amount of physical effort that the other 9 outfield players are able to make for Cristiano Ronaldo. And you know what? That has been the case for a very long time. That goes back a decade. That's nothing new. That's nothing to do with his age now. It's really everything post-2014 World Cup, when they realised that he couldn't quite give the same physical efforts in terms of covering ground as he could before. And, Real Madrid really asked him not to press going forward from that point. So he's been not pressing for a very long time. And Portugal under Fernando Santos and now later most latterly under Roberto Martinez have been playing in different ways to really find a different way of dealing with that. But I think always the problem for Portugal is finding that perfect balance between those teams. I think this was a great exercise for them, just as qualifiers should be, really. You should be trying to find out. I think especially if you're a contender, if you're in England, if you're a Portugal, if you're a France, you should be trying to find out about your team as well. And I think they will have, because the way that the Republic of Ireland defended was brilliant. Kevin Kelleher played really, really well. And I think there are a couple of things to take from that. Firstly, I think it is a helpful reminder that when you lean too hard on Ronaldo to take the chances, you've got a bit of an issue. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And he didn't really do that much wrong. Of course, the penalty, which I thought was a great save, by the way, because Kelleher had gone the wrong way and he managed to stop it with his legs. A little bit like David Seaman against Gary McAllister in Euro 96.
Yeah, okay, really. I'll take that.
It was a really good save, I thought.
He had a great game, Keller, in general. Yeah,
he did. He hit the post before that. Ronaldo as well. But they've got so many different ways of skinning you, Portugal, and they were able to keep going in that case. So despite missing chance after chance, even though Ireland defended very, very well, they found another way. And funnily enough, if you'd have said Ruben Neves was going to crack it open, you'd have said with a shot from outside the penalty box. It wasn't. It was a header in the 6-yard box. And
it was because against Liam O'Brien and Nathan Collins. Amazing.
Yeah, and it was because they were able to bring up on Trincao, who, again, you expect to come inside and have a shot. And it was a brilliant ball from him to
and also, Andy, and I know we'll get any argument, any pushback from you about this. They also scored the goal once they brought on Gonzalo Ramos, just as PSG did in the Super Cup final. So they did there. He just gives more space. He forces the defenders to make more decisions than Cristiano Ronaldo does these days. Although I've got to say about Cristiano Ronaldo, he's amazing to watch him develop his game. Now, because he doesn't run, he has developed the first-time shot to an extraordinary level. No backlit at all, and he threatened the Ireland goal several times. Let's not kid ourselves about that.
Yeah, I mean, he's like Marlon Brando next to the swimming pool, basically, isn't he?
I'm not sure what that means. What does that mean?
When Marlon Brando, I'm struggling to think of what film it was. Right near the end of his career, where he's sat next to the swimming pool making very little moves, but every move is a decisive one.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, I should have been up with that because he's one of my absolute heroes. Terrible man, fantastic actor. Spain beat Georgia by 2-0. No Lamine Yamal, no problem, Andy. And Spain look. They're very different from the Spain that dominated football 12, 15 years ago, but they do look extremely, in motoring terms, they're in third gear and just purring along.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think if you look at this in most ways, the fact that they beat Georgia 2-0, you think, okay, pretty routine. Georgia was slightly hobbled by the fact that Kvaratskhelia is not entirely fit at the moment, which I think makes a massive difference, their ability to counter-attack. But it was such a strong Spain performance. They absolutely hammered them. And they were able to get it over the line in the end. And I think particularly the second goal, and Mikel Oyarzabal, because he still plays for Real Sociedad, is perennially underrated. Brilliant free kick goal from him. Again, a penalty save, Mamardashvili, who started playing for Liverpool since the Alisson injury, saved a penalty as well. But still, he had no chance really against the goals. And Spain are so versatile as well. And we talked about maybe Nuno Mendes being the best player in the world in his position. I think we can say the same for Pedri as well, who I know wowed a lot of people when the way he played for Barcelona at St. James's Park in the Champions League, going back a few weeks. He is just consistently unbelievable. And it's sometimes overshadowed because he's in a team with Lamine Yamal. It's difficult to see what they could do between now and June to say, yeah, maybe we're not the favourites for the World Cup. They're going to have to do something pretty wild to pose a counter proposition.
Yeah, let me just remind you then that our poll tonight, that if it's not England, who are the current favourites for the World Cup next summer? It's a Twitter poll. We go to @talkSPORT, @Danny Kelly Words or Andy Brassell, Argentina, France, Spain or other. We'll talk about others a little later on. Next up here on Trans Europe Express, we'll turn our attention to Italy and Belgium. Italy, of course, haven't qualified for the last 2 World Cups. We'll see how they're getting on very, very soon here on Trans-Europe Express. Yeah, all those games in Europe coming to an end. Greece have just had the ball in the net again, disallowed rightly for offside. They're 3-1 down to Denmark, a result which will ensure that Scotland get to at least the playoffs. Big night, therefore, for Scotland. Meanwhile, as I say, Poland are still 2 up against Lithuania. Croatia have got a second against Gibraltar. Petr Susic has added to the goal by Tony Fruck. So 2-0 to Croatia there. I'll give you the final whistle when it goes in Denmark. Andy, let's move on to some other nations. Italy, multiple winners of the World Cup, one of the great centres of world football, but haven't qualified for the last 2 tournaments. And making, if not a meal, then certainly a starter out of this tournament as well. But René Gattuso, their manager, he just cannot keep his trap shut. Every game is like a philosophical discussion for him. But they are improving, Italy. They have great defenders, as so very often. Don't want to stereotype, but they do. So he's threatened to go to 3 at the back. But more importantly, after years without a Kazuragi or someone to play up front, they suddenly got a plethora of centre forwards.
Yeah, they really do. And just as people had been finding reasons to not recall Mario Balotelli, like him not having a club or playing at a decent level and all that other sort of stuff, we're finally past the Balotelli conversation.
Yeah, thing of the past now.
Partly because we've had this great relationship blossom ever since Gattuso arrived between Matteo Retegui, who of course was brilliant for Atalanta last season, then moved to Saudi, has continued scoring goals as if nothing ever happened for the national team, and Moise Kean, who's been brilliant since he's been at Fiorentina as well. What a great pairing they are. Superb opener by Kean in this, and then he had to go off. So he was replaced by Francesco Pio Esposito, who has been really good for Inter so far. He showed a lot of promise during the Club World Cup and he only ended up going because they were a bit short and the squad were knackered. And he did so well, they've ended up holding on to him this season. He's looked fantastic as well in the Serie A games that he's played, and he came on and scored the last goal against Estonia in Tallinn with the middle one scored by Retegui, who also missed a penalty, and they're just great to watch. It's funny because if you look at the situation where Gattuso took over, and I think sometimes people have a slightly confused idea of what Gattuso is as a coach. I think it's all blood and thunder and shouting and banging your fist on the table and all that sort of stuff. And it is that as well, obviously.
There's plenty of that, yeah.
Yeah, but what has impressed me so much about Italy since he took over, they're real fun to watch. So I know he likes to put his head in the mouth of the lion in every one of his managerial appointments. But in this one, he's saying, okay, not only are we going to have a proper pot for the World Cup and make sure we get ourselves in the position to get there and not miss out 3 times in a row, but they're doing it in style. And, you know, he's going against some of his instincts as well. You know, you talked about that 3 at the back thing and the way he framed it, anyone else would say, look, we're open to all possibility. He said, well, look, I'm just going to go with what suits my players best. I hate it personally, but we're going to go with whatever suits my players best. And
Andy, I'll come back to
Gattuso way of saying things.
Italy in a second. Sorry to interrupt, but the final whistle has gone in Copenhagen. Denmark 3, Greece 1. Really important result in the World Cup qualifiers in Europe, because that means that Denmark and Scotland are guaranteed at least a playoff place now. Greece are out. Belarus, who shouldn't have been in the first place, are out as well. So somewhere, I can't remember if the game is in Scotland or in Norway, but there's going to be essentially a playoff for the top spot there. Denmark and Scotland at least guaranteed playoff place now. What a great achievement for Scotland. Denmark too. Italy, Andy, they're doing okay under the pressure. I mean, and Gattuso, of course, one of the things he does, he drains all the pressure away because he's such a character himself. However, they're not going to qualify automatically, at least it doesn't seem so, because the team that's in the group with them, Norway, who we'll talk about later, they've won all 6 of their games.
Yep.
And they've got a goal difference, let me just check it out, of 26 compared to Italy's 7. So they are effectively 7 points ahead of Italy.
Yeah, they have their own not especially secret cheat code.
They do indeed, but of course then they have their other secret, which is they keep adding better players to the cheat code, and we'll talk about that a little later. Meanwhile, Belgium, I guess you and I have been talking about them for 15 years, Andy. Certainly on Trans Europe Express, this is our 10th season. We've been talking about Belgium all that time. They still got some fantastic players, but they still managed to make everything look so difficult. They weren't great against North Macedonia.
No, they weren't. And you know what? We were talking about Italy before and falling into traps versus North Macedonia. If we go back a couple of qualifying campaigns, this was sort of reminiscent of that. It was incredibly one-sided in Ghent. Belgium were on top of them for the entire game, created tons of chances. that image that the people who are following us on YouTube can see at the moment of a load of North Macedonian players behind the ball while Belgium have a shot is indicative of the whole evening. But they missed chance after chance after chance. It was a game where they really missed Romelu Lukaku. There's no doubt about that. Kevin De Bruyne showed up. He was excellent, I thought. But they just really didn't work the goalkeeper enough. I mean, they had, 25, 26 shots, but I didn't feel the North Macedonian goalkeeper had to have a particularly exceptional game. I think the fact that Lois Openda, who's just moved to Juventus and hasn't been used that much, looked a bit rusty.
That's it. Yeah.
Was a bit of an issue as well in this. But, we still expect them to get themselves there, even though if they'd have won that, they'd have qualified.
Yes, this was one of those ones where you're right on the verge of qualification and haven't quite made it yet. As we say, Italy looking so much better, but because of that Norway thing, it does look like they'll have to come through the playoffs, which and I can hear Daniele Fisichella screaming at his radio as we speak, which they have not been particularly good at.
No.
In recent times. But as I say, at least having a whole load of strikers, as you pointed out, Andy, gives them perhaps more chance than the days when they were depending more on their always impressive phalanx of defenders. You're listening to Trans Europe Express. And next we'll be talking about an improving German side, if how can I put it, unpredictable, and a Holland team that is also bejeweled with talent, but perhaps lacking an out-and-out world-class striker, although the person who started up front today has broken all the national goal-scoring records. Germany and Holland next. Yeah, and this Monday on talkSPORT, football icon Paul Gascoigne joins Jim White, Simon Jordan, Martin Keown live in the studio to discuss his new book. A maverick on the pitch, a genius, to be honest, to challenges off it, from the FA Cup triumph with Spurs, titles at Rangers and near misses with England. Gazza's opening up everything that shaped his story. So don't miss Paul Gascoigne live with Jim White, Simon Jordan and Martin Keown this Monday here on talkSPORT. Fantastic. So Andy, let's talk then about Germany. They beat Luxembourg 4-0. You'd expect to beat them. Luxembourg, of course, had a player sent off quite early in the piece as well.
They did.
You're of the opinion that we'll learn a little bit more about this German side, which has so far been, I think, to Nagelsmann's frustration, incredibly difficult to predict how they're going to play from game to game. We'll learn more when they take on Northern Ireland tomorrow.
I think we will. I think we'll learn a lot in Belfast tomorrow. It's going to be a really fascinating game that I'm looking forward to. And especially after Northern Ireland did Germany a massive favour, really, by beating Slovakia at Windsor Park. Now, remember, that result that Germany had in Bratislava is the real fly in their qualifying ointment so far. They lost 2-0 there, and they were absolutely rancid in doing so as well. Whereas Slovakia have had a few fallouts behind the scenes, and I thought it really showed in the game in Belfast, in which Northern Ireland were excellent, by the way. They were really, really good, and they deserved their win. But this is really interesting, because if you look at Germany on paper, they look fantastic. That guy, Serge Gnabry, has been in fantastic form for Bayern recently. It's easy to forget that he came out the traps amazingly quickly in international football, goal-scoring wise, enviable record from like his first 20 games in German colours. And then everything's gone a bit sideways. And you could say that for most of the Germany team. And it's just the fact that you don't know what you're going to get. They then have a major roadblock, which is why I find it difficult to consider them genuine contenders for the latter stage of the World Cup at the moment, which they've got to get to first. So
yes,
I think this is going to tell us a lot, this game. I think having Nick Woltemade as the starting centre forward, it feels like a step forward, because he was such a breath of fresh air during the Euro under-21s, and of course has done great things in the Premier League since. He's made massive strides in the last 12 months.
It's evident, yeah, absolutely.
And it's what they need. They have needed a proper centre forward, and a centre forward of quality, of personality and authority for quite a while. But then again, this all feels like a placeholder until Jamal Musiala comes back, because you look at it and you think, okay, there's a lot of sense there. Even if it's maybe slightly to attack and you can afford yourself that against Luxembourg, it doesn't really matter. That's why I say the Northern Ireland game is going to teach us more. It'll be interesting to see. Presumably they go with Woltemade and Wirtz behind him again. But, yes, of course, if Germany in Euro 2024 are anything to go by, when it gets to the World Cup, they'll want to play Woltemade with Wirtz and Musiala behind him. So it changes the shape of the team, and it changes how they need to look defensively as well. And defensively has been the major problem, because the fullbacks have been massively exposed, and they've not really had any protection for that defence.
No, I guess the thing, if you were rooting for Germany, is that both Wirtz and Woltemade and even Musiala, they're so young that they could, in the next 9 months, improve another 10-20%. This is what happens with young players, isn't it? And
the question is, Danny, how many goals do they have to score to make what's happening at the other end not matter? That's the question, isn't it?
Yes, they haven't got outstanding defenders.
Well, they've got pretty good defenders, but the shape of the team, I think, encourages them. Look, it's a circle that Nagelsmann could never square at Bayern. If you think both him and Thomas Tuchel wanted to play offensive football at Bayern that left the team way too open, and Nagelsmann is kind of doing the same thing with Germany.
All three of them want to play Kimmich at right back and in midfield, and even a great player, as great as he is, he can't play both at the same time, can he?
No.
Meanwhile, the Netherlands, they also they've had pretty straightforward victories over Malta and Finland. the game against Finland saw Memphis Depay. In fact, he scored in both games, extending his national goal-scoring record, which those of us who remember generation after generation of fabulous Dutch forward players find a little bit strange. But, of course, you can't deny the lad's figures. They're fantastic. He almost didn't make the first game, Andy.
No, that's right. His passport was stolen on the way out of Brazil, I suppose, which is really indicative of his career over the last couple of years. Because, of course, the most famous passport loser of the last couple of months is Lamine Yamal. You remember him after they gave that absolute recital, Spain, away to Turkey. And after the game, after Lamine Yamal had given another performance that quite heavily suggested that he's the best player in the world, he was out there with his little carry-on case, standing outside the team bus, rooting through it, trying to find his passport, and then going back to the dressing room, not finding it there, and having to get the elderly administrators of the team to figure out how he was going to get back to Spain. Memphis, as I guess is indicative of the pecking order at Barcelona in recent years, sort of did it in reverse, really, and it was a little less dramatic, but still there's something that links the two, I suppose. And he did make it in the end, and he has scored goals in, again, what we've been saying about a lot of European qualifying, a series of games in which we learn very little about these teams.
Yeah.
I mean, Donyell Malen confirming his excellent form of late. He scored the opening goal, and a very good opening goal against Finland today. But everything that he and Gakpo and Memphis have done over these recent games, it's not really taught us anything new, has it?
All right, that is true, Andy. And now I'm going to do what I always do and stick up for the Netherlands here, because of my vintage. I think they transformed football when I was young. They are the team that meant that I am going to spend a life absolutely transfixed by international football. And I'm just saying to you, they put out a back four here against in the game against Finland of Denzel Dumfries, Jurrien Timber, Virgil van Dijk, and Mickey van der Ven. On the bench, they had Nathan Ake, they had Jan van Hecker, they had Frimpong, and their reserve goalkeeper is Roofs, who we know is an absolutely brilliant player as well. Yeah. I think if you've got that start in any tournament, if you are defensively stable, now I know teams are not just defenders, that they have to be augmented. Then they had Gravenberg in front of them as well. I just think that they're to be watched, the Netherlands. I feel that they might be better than anyone's given them credit for.
Yeah, I think there's something
from this tournament. I
think there's something to be said for that. And if we're talking about finding the right balance, as Germany have really struggled to, I feel as if the Netherlands are closer to that than Germany, actually. And I think when you're talking about Van der Ven playing at left back, that's really important, because if you're looking at whether Dumfries plays, which he will if he's fit, or Jeremy Frimpong, Van der Ven is exactly the left back you want. I know there'll be Spurs fans out there saying, but he's not a left back. Well, no. But if you've got a right back who isn't really right back and just wants to go,
who's 3/4 way out the pitch, they can go to a 3 at the back.
The 3 shifting across
with the fastest player in world football in that back four. It's an incredible piece of luck they've got.
Exactly. And the other thing I think is the pairing of Gravenberg and Frenkie de Jong. And Frenkie de Jong is playing fantastically well for Barcelona in the last 10 months, which I think is absolutely vital to them. He's a proper leader. Both of them are incredibly adaptable players, which obviously is the result of their breeding, is coming through the Ajax Academy and coming through the modern Ajax Academy, which gives you strength as well as tactical adaptability, physical strength as well as tactical adaptability. If we're looking at it from a Spurs perspective, which I guess we kind of have to because it's your show, it's your name above the door. The thing that worries me the most about the Netherlands is, rather than the absence of a top-class striker, because I think they can get through with, especially Gakpo, but to a lesser extent, Memphis, whose statistics Marlon, demand respect. Marlon, even Wout Weghorst, who's something a little bit different, as he was all the way going back to the 2022 World Cup. When we've mentioned all these players, where is the space for Xavi Simons? Now, Xavi Simons is a player who deserves to have a team built around him, I don't see how the Netherlands can do that, and I've never seen how the Netherlands can do that. And when I looked at them at Euro 2024, you're looking at him and you're thinking, well, he's doing bits, but you want to build the team around him.
But Andy,
they refuse to do so, and I think they will continue to refuse to do so because, weirdly, I think culturally he doesn't really fit with what Dutch football and what the Dutch national team wants to do.
No, but I would say this: he's both given the manager a problem in the last 4 days and also given himself a problem, because in both games he came on for less than 12 minutes and assisted a goal in both games.
Yes.
So that's both saying, look, I really can be an integral part of this team, but the manager will say, you're very good from off the bench, son. So that's definitely one to watch into the future. He needs to pick up his form at Spurs first and get used to the Premier League. I mean, obviously a player who can beat his man and then play a little chip pass or see the pass of 4 yards that dismantles a whole defence, they're still very rare in world football. And when you've had 80 minutes of Weghorst running directly at the centre backs with his head down, maybe they'll go for a bit of a mix and match in that. Listen, I can't believe that's the first hour has gone by, including the radio first of my illustration of what is going on with UEFA's decision to play some matches in the United States and Western Australia. There it is again for all of you who want to see these things. Andy and I will be back in just a few seconds, and we'll get on with a whole lot more stuff, including much stuff going on around the French team. We'll do that in Mbappe Watch next here on Trans Europe Express.
What football ground are you thinking of when someone says this.
Really tough place to go. Difficult place to go. Such a tough place to go.
It's a tough place to go at the moment.
It was a really difficult place to go, always.
But what are the toughest places to go, really? We've scoured the planet to find out. Forget a cold, wet Tuesday night in Stoke. Try playing in a blizzard 220 miles inside the Arctic Circle at the world's northernmost professional club. When Chelsea lost at Tromsø in Norway in the 97-98 Cup Winners' Cup, a massive snowstorm hit at half-time. These two boys and their brooms were absolutely no match for it. We're staying in Scandinavia for Scotland's toughest away day on a windswept cliff in the Faroe Islands. In Euro 2000 qualifying, Craig Brown's men were taken to fishing village Toftir. Kevin Gallagher called the pitch a cowfield and the wind like Pitodry on a bad day. The Faroe Islands part-timers equalised in stoppage time, leading to these absolute scenes, and still one of Scotland's most embarrassing results.
Daft little ground, silly game.
But away trips don't come any tougher than a lung-busting schlep up the Andes to face Bolivia in La Paz. But now the Bolivians have taken home advantage to another level. The country's highest city, El Alto, 4,100 metres above sea level. Grass doesn't even grow up here. Bolivia have not lost here yet. The longest unbeaten run in any professional league ever belongs to Red Star Belgrade, or Crvena Zvezda if you must. They've gone 7 years without defeat at the Rajko Mitic in Serbia's Superliga. Their fans are pretty intimidating as well, but they're not as loud as this mob. Galatasaray's Ali Sami Yen Stadium's officially the loudest in world football. In a derby with Fenerbahce, Galatasaray fans set a Guinness World Record of 131 decibels. That's louder than Motorhead, and pretty tough to carry out your manager's instructions when you can't even hear them. However, our most intimidating away day is in Wales, where cameras can't enter and players can't leave. HMP Prescoed. This prison team was briefly kicked out the Gwent League over concerns about young opposition having to go in there. Now that's a tough place to go.
Early June 1939, Germany, always a tough place to go to.
Welcome back to the second hour of three of tonight's edition of Trans-Europe Express with me, Danny Kelly, and Andy Brassell. And during the course of the next 60 minutes, we'll be bringing you all the latest from Spain, including the shocking state of Barcelona's finances, part 773. We'll talk a little bit about stuff that's going on in Germany, including the latest from football's hippest star, Jackson Irvine of San Pauli. And later on, we'll bring you more from Italy, where we hadn't updated you on the big argument about what's going to happen to the San Siro, and that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Daniele Fisichella. That's all coming up in the next 60 minutes. You're very welcome to Trans-Europe Express, and now it's time for this.
Sa carrière, le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappe! Mbappe! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, shooter! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de Kylian Mbappe. Allez, Kylian!
Now, Andy, at the start of this international break, Kylian Mbappe would have expected to captain France in 2 games. He was the captain for the 3-0 win against Azerbaijan. He scored as well. But he won't be in the game against Iceland tomorrow because of an ankle injury, the seriousness of which we don't know.
Basically, he got smacked on the same ankle as he got smacked on against Villarreal in Real Madrid's last game, which saw him go off in the closing stages of that. Didier Deschamps, in full international manager speak. Of course, he's used to it enough, having been in post for a while now. Said he said he was fine beforehand. I mean, when does a player ever say he's fine when he's not?
They always want to play.
But he got a pretty hefty whack on that ankle again. He played on for about half an hour after taking the whack, and then went off. Of course, it was him that opened the scoring, as you said, right on the stroke of half time against Azerbaijan, and they really needed it. Of course, the FFF, the French FA, their in-house channel released a sort of behind-the-scenes film following this of Didier Deschamps and the players and all the rest of it. And Deschamps was very, very unhappy with them at half-time when they were only 1-0 up, and it had taken a personal exploit really from Kylian Mbappe. And funnily enough, of all the things that you look at with Mbappe, and people say, oh, well, he's game so much based on pace. What can he do against a packed defence? Well, get the ball deep, dribble around a couple and smash it in from the edge of the box. I mean, that really underlined exactly where he is at the moment and what a good place he's in. Also, it marked the first time in his career that he scored in 10 successive games. So, and it's the 19th time in his France career that he's scored and assisted in the same game, because he set up the second for Adrien Rabiot just before he went off as well.
And look, the goal itself, but which you caused me to look at, very original Ronaldo in his finish there, very, very good indeed. But look, Kylian Mbappe, but perhaps because the media and people like us study his every move and mood with a jeweler's eyepiece, he's on a kind of roller coaster all the time, isn't he? A little bit up, a little bit down. And he appears to be that in the national team, he's once again restoring his reputation and his popularity, while, and this is not an original thought, you told me to say this, he is learning to captain the team on the job and as part of a committee.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people thought he was a strange choice as France captain. Not least Antoine Griezmann, who was expecting to get it and didn't. And a lot of people expected that. And that accelerated his international retirement. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And whether France and Didier Deschamps handled it brilliantly, I think is open to question. But Mbappe's had to deal with, over the last couple of years, and really since the last couple of years at PSG, declining popularity in France. Now, he's taken moves to address that. There's no doubt about that. But one of them is the humility to realise that maybe he's not the most natural captain. And if he is going to captain his country, maybe he should do it by leaning on the senior players around him. And he leans a lot on Rabiot, on Mike Maignan, on Ibrahima Konate, who was one of the other candidates to be captain despite having relatively little international experience at the time. He's a born leader, there's no doubt about that. And that's something that's really working for Mbappe at the moment. So I think he's someone who's planned to be a footballer ever since he was a little kid. So I think a lot of it he had planned out in his head already. But stuff like this, I think you can't know how to deal with it until it arrives. And that is the bit that he's been learning on the job.
He's been given the captaincy perhaps earlier than in a perfect world, because you could argue that both Rabiot and Maignan are more obvious candidates for the French captaincy. But he's Mbappe. You have to, if he wants it, you have to give it to him. And I've got no problem with that, by the way. One or two names we should talk about in the forward line for France. We'll talk about Jean-Philippe Matete a little later, making his debut in his late 20s for France. But perhaps even more remarkably, Florian Thauvin, once of Newcastle United, and returned to the squad after 6 years to a mixed reception, I think it's fair to say, Andy.
Yeah, well, of all the places that he could have come back after 6 years, Parc des Princes probably wasn't his ideal one. Very synonymous with Marseille, of course, where he had two spells either side of that pretty unsuccessful time at Newcastle. So he got booed when he came on as a substitute. What better way to shut them all up than scoring after 1 minute of being on? And funnily enough, it was remarkably like his last goal for France, which was a tumbling scissors kick. This was exactly the same. It was a brilliant finish. And it's been a real successful time over the last couple of days for Florian Thauvin. Now, of course, after he left Marseille for the second time, he went to Mexico, went to Tigres, fancying himself as the next André-Pierre Gignac. Didn't work out at all. And he really had to rebuild himself in Europe at Udinese. Made it back to Ligue 1 and to Lens this summer. And he's looked brilliant. He's looked so fit. And the France medical staff are so impressed with him this week and what incredible nick he's in. But I thought what was interesting as well is when Didier Deschamps was giving this telling off to all the players at half-time, the first player to speak up and start revving up the team, Florian Thauvin. At that point, hadn't played for France for 6 years because he still hadn't come on, of course. And I thought that was quite indicative of someone who's keen to be a senior player who takes responsibility. Look, he had a bad reputation when he was younger, not just for the tuxedo thing at Newcastle, but of course he moved to Lille from Bastia when he was first making it, decided he wanted to play for Marseille, so went to about 3 training sessions and decided he wasn't going to turn up again until they sold him to Marseille, which they did for about 3 times what they bought him for, but still something that hurt a little bit and left him with the sort of mark on his rep that doesn't go away quickly. But he's reinventing himself. And I think if you look at Didier Deschamps, he really loves a player who can be in the squad, much like Thauvin was at the 2018 World Cup, because we should be calling him World Cup winner, Florian Thauvin. Really, he was part of that squad, just like Nabil Fekir and other players that you forget, like Corentin Tolisso, who were part of it. He loves a player, again, a little bit like Randall Kolo Muani, who goes to a major tournament knowing he's not going to play much, but can be a good teammate. That is something that really, really matters to Deschamps, especially when you look at the history of France in the couple of years before Deschamps took over, where they were famous for these massive fallouts behind the scenes.
Yeah. I think no, there can't be anybody who watches the Premier League who isn't delighted for Jean-Philippe Mateta, who has, in his late 20s, has done brilliantly for Crystal Palace, improved, adapted after a difficult start, adapted to the Premier League. He made his French debut at 28, which is great, but I don't want to patronise. It wasn't a kind of, here's a cap, but it is kind of hard to see him making the World Cup squad.
Yeah, and that's been much of the discussion in France ever since he got picked, because, of course, he's come into this squad that has no Ousmane Dembélé, no Désiré Doué, no Marcus Thuram, and that's without talking about the retirements of Giroud and Griezmann in the recent past. Yeah. But if we're talking about all those players being available, it is quite difficult to imagine a spot where he's going to arrive. But again, I'd redirect you to the previous thing. Deschamps absolutely loves a dark horse, like a Kolo Muani, someone who can come in, be really pleased to be part of it, pleased to be there and to be ready at a moment's notice. Now, look, Mateta is someone who would walk over broken glass to play for France. He was someone who was delighted to be part of the Olympic team, which, like a lot of players, turned down so they could go on holiday or rest and recover. He wasn't going to do that for a second. And so if you're talking about a guy who is ready to receive the opportunity, we're saying, right, when everyone's fit next year, he's not going to get picked. What if everyone's not fit next year?
Exactly.
This is something that happens, isn't it? Not just in football in general, but particularly at the moment when you're talking about players who are playing a lot of games, so are more susceptible to injury, and particularly with PSG, where there's been absolutely no break. All Mateta needs to do is be ready to receive. And he has been ready for a long time, and he's made it clear he's been ready. He spoke this week about how some of his Crystal Palace teammates took the mickey out of him when he said, I'm going to play for France one day. I think he said Wilfried Zaha actually laughed when he said, I'm going to play for France one day. But he's believed the whole time. He's always had the talent, and it looked like it was always going to remain potential. But in the last year and a half, he has made things happen that you wouldn't have thought possible. So why wouldn't he back himself?
Yeah, fantastic, Andy. Thank you. Now, if I take 1 minute, Andy, I'm going to embarrass a chum of mine. Earlier in the show, I used the newfound fact that we're on visuals to illustrate a thing that we're talking about with my drawing of the thin end of a wedge. Yes, I'm bang up to date now with being visual as well as audio. I've had a text, Andy, which says, let me just say this. Lovely wedge drawing, Danny. it said. Now, of course, you might expect that, yes? But the person it's come from, sorry, Michael, is Michael Canning, who is one of Ireland's leading artists and painters. Absolutely. Look up Michael's work. It's on display in London galleries and all the rest of it. His paintings of wildflowers with the background countryside beyond the wildflowers are exquisite, brilliant, much admired and much desired. And when he says that my wedge drawing was good, you're getting it from a master. Thank you, Michael, who is now listening with the most purple of faces, I'm sure. You're listening to Trans-Europe Express. Yeah, talkSPORT Breakfast returns from 6 a.m. tomorrow morning as Jeff Stelling and Ali McCoist are joined by a host of guests, including former Wales and Liverpool striker Ian Rush and Swindon Town manager Ian Holloway, as they look back on another huge weekend in the world of sport. That's breakfast from 6 a.m. tomorrow morning with Jeff Stelling and Ali McCoist. And I'm sure Ali will be as thrilled as all these other countrymen and countrywomen with the news that Scotland have, after the results today in the World Cup qualifiers, at least made the playoffs. They and Denmark will arm wrestle for the automatic qualification place in that group. Let's take a deep breath. We'll return at about 11:15 to international football, 12:15 rather, to international football. Talk about some of the games and countries we haven't yet dissected. Let's go back to what's happening with club football. Of course, as always, with professional sport at this level, the fact there's no fixtures, it doesn't seem to stop the news flow one iota, Andy. So we'll start with Spain, and reports confirming that despite all the lever pulling, despite selling their future in large chunks to banks and other investment vehicles over the past 2 or 3 years, Barcelona's finances remain in a quite bonkers state. The big thing this week has been not only the fact that they owe other clubs hundreds of millions of pounds for players they bought, but those clubs, we'll get onto that in a second, don't trust them enough to get paid and have been selling the debt to, frankly, debt collection agencies.
Yeah.
Let's start with how much money they own, Andy.
Yeah, so I guess on paper it sounds horrendous. They owe 159 million euros for players that they've already bought. So we're talking about Rafinha, Lewandowski, Jules Koundé, mainstays of the team, but not just mainstays of the team, mainstays of the team who've been there for a number of years. Now, of course, it's normal. We have to say it's completely normal for clubs to owe money and pay for it over a number of years for a player they've bought. So, very few clubs pay for players up front. There's no question that, say, for example, Rafinha goes for 80 million euros, Leeds receive a suitcase full of the readies right there and then. And if they're not expecting that, all the better, because they're still owed over 40 million by Barcelona. Now, this is the headline one, but really the interesting one is it's been misreported, actually, that in a lot of places that Jules Koundé, for his transfer, the 24.5 million is still owed to Sevilla for Jules Koundé. It is not owed to Sevilla, because Sevilla, thinking we desperately need the money and we don't know when we're going to get it off Barcelona, they sold it to a financing company. They sold the debt, basically. So they paid 1.5 million euros for the privilege, and they got all the Jules Koundé money there and then because they desperately needed it. And now this 24.5 million is owed to this third party, really, by Barcelona, which is interesting. Now, of course, the top line of Barcelona's financial results was ever so optimistic. That they only lost around 20 million euros last year. And
hooray! Well done, everybody.
The new Camp Nou's opening, of course, all the hospitality's already been sold and been banked, or at least that's what the club has been reporting over recent months. Now, this is one of the reasons that they're very keen to get the new Camp Nou open. Now, it's been announced this week that the next home game will be played against Girona at Montjuic, as we'd expected, and we expect them to play the rest of the Champions League campaign at Montjuic as well. I guess the question is when they can move into Camp Nou, not just for La Liga purposes, because you would expect that to be before Christmas still, and they're relatively optimistic about that, but when they'll be able to do it for Champions League purposes, and will they be able to do it this season? Because, of course, Barcelona are required to have a greater capacity in a European context, in a UEFA club competition context, than they are in a La Liga context. So there's phase 1A and 1B of the reopening of Camp Nou. Now, the 1A would give them a capacity of about 27,000, and that's what they've been proceeding along for the opening part of this season, when they were still hoping to have that first game against PSG at Camp Nou. UEFA weren't keen to have that on that basis. Now, 1B is 45,000 capacity. Now, they haven't got the license for 1A, let alone 1B at the moment, so we'll see how quickly that can happen. They're hopeful that they can proceed directly to 1B, at which point they would be allowed to move in for UEFA club competition, because, you have all the advertising boards and all that sort of gear that's standard, really. It's still unlikely that they would be, UEFA wouldn't be pleased about them moving mid-league stage, so it still seems like the knockout stages are the most likely point that they'll be able to do that. But hopefully, from their perspective, obviously they're monstrously optimistic, but they were monstrously optimistic in thinking they could move in a year ago, basically, which was clearly never going to happen. So, we'll believe it when they're in there.
Absolutely. And for Leeds United fans, listen to my voice. Yes, you are still owed 40 million for Rafinha. Let's move on to Atletico Madrid, Andy, and players who would have normally been away on international duty but no longer are required. Koke, for instance, and Griezmann. But interestingly, as their international careers faded, and you might thought maybe their club careers were going to wind down again, they have become, for a variety of reasons, really important to Atletico Madrid's season.
Yeah, they have. I mean, they were always the old guy standard bearers from the early years of the Simeone era. And, we knew they were spiritually important to Atletico. But what has been really interesting about the opening part of this season, especially after all the signings they made this summer and last summer, is that Koke and Griezmann have been important on the pitch as well, especially Koke, it has to be said. Now, of course, we celebrated the fact that against Eintracht Frankfurt, Griezmann got to 200 goals, which he would have got to a lot quicker if he hadn't have nipped off to Barcelona for a couple of years. He'd also be a league title winner, but that's another matter. But Koke is the only player under Diego Simeone who's been there for all of Simeone's 8 trophies.
Amazing.
He is 33 years old, and he is 7 games off 700 games for Atletico, which is remarkable.
700 games for any club is one thing. 700 games under Diego Simeone lashing you up and down the pitch is entirely another, isn't it?
That's like 2,000, basically.
It is. Yeah, I mean, poor old Koke, he'll retire from professional football and go straight to the care home, won't he? Because it's just mad what he's been asked to do
it's
for
incredible,
that club.
But also that he has proved himself relevant on the pitch this season. So we would expect Griezmann, despite the fact that he's got a contract for a year beyond this season, to probably go to MLS next season. That would not be a major surprise to me or anyone else. He's going to be 35 in March. It's going to happen sooner or later. And this seems like probably the moment. But with all the absences they've had with Cardoso, with Thiago Almada, with Alex Baena over the start of this season, Koke has seized the moment, and maybe he did it away at Liverpool in the Champions League where he came on and stratospherically improved their performance when he came on. Since then, started 5 La Liga games out of 5, and he's looked the best he has in a fair old while, and he's made Atletico look the best they have in a while. So I'm sure Diego Simeone, when all those players were going off, and of course they always have players going off to South America as well, that's very much part of the Atletico experience. When he just turned up to training and could still see Koke and Griezmann, I'm sure he exhaled.
Last thing, Andy, on Spain, you noted, of course, it's very early in the season, but it is worth noting, 3 of the bottom 4 are not minnows, but clubs that would expect to be in La Liga most seasons.
Yeah, so Granada, Malaga, who've been struggling for a while, and dead last, Real Zaragoza, who have been a huge club over the years, struggling for a number of years now. And we were talking about Atletico legends. Well, Gabi, of course, was the captain when they first won the title under Simeone in 2014. He's been their coach since March. No more. Fired with them bottom of the table. So some huge names in danger of going out of the Segunda. And you know what? It's not like getting relegated from, we can think of big names that were relegated from the Championship to League One. Not the same in Spain. Really hard to come back up, because finishing top of your table doesn't guarantee you'll come up, because there are a load of teams on that level and then they play off and reach a final from there. It took a long time for Deportivo La Coruña, who are currently top of the Segunda, by the way, to come back from the Segunda B. It was really tough for them. And, it can mean falling into semi-professionalism.
Listen, thank you very much indeed for that. Next, we'll be turning our attention here on Trans-Europe Express. Everything's happening in Germany. Listen, this should be fantastic, particularly as we're heading very, very quickly now towards an Ashes winter in Australia. But the former England captain Andrew Flintoff joins his ex-teammate Steve Harmison for a special interview on the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel, chatting about his new book, Coming Home, which is out now. To watch the full interview, make sure you head over to talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel and subscribe, or you can listen to it via the following on podcast feed. That should be fantastic. Andy, let's turn our attention, as I am now learning to say less and less, to goings on in Germany. I can't wait to get on to discussing Jackson Irvine, who in Andy's opinion is the coolest footballer in the world. He also plays for the coolest team in the world, and the story will involve the conflict in the Middle East, actual board members, and his lady wife. All of that will be coming up very, very soon. But first, I want to talk about players who are currently looking at their game minutes, their involvement with big clubs, and thinking, oh, this is a World Cup year. I guess the obvious example, one of which would be Jan Bissek. Such a good and big, strong fella at Inter Milan playing centre-back, but not getting many minutes now. He'll be starting to panic about getting into the German squad, for instance.
Yeah, and apparently he already is. So this week it's looked possible that he will seek a January exit, and Eintracht Frankfurt are one of those interested. Now, we've seen in the early part of the season that when Eintracht Frankfurt are good, they're really, really good and could maybe be the best threat to Bayern, even though they're absolutely thrashed by them going back to last weekend, in which Bayern gave their best performance of the season, which in itself is a huge compliment to Eintracht Frankfurt, by the way. Yeah. And we've also seen the fact that Eintracht Frankfurt realised that now they're playing with the big boys. They're in the Champions League as well, and they're going to need a bit of extra depth, perhaps at the back in particular. And Bissek would be a step up for them. And I mean, no disrespect to the current holders of the flame like Robin Koch, but Bissek's a terrific player.
No, he's a good player, yeah.
From Cologne as well. But it just hasn't really happened for him so far under Christian Kivu. He's preferred other options. And so Bissek's looking at that, and particularly looking at the current Germany team and thinking, I could get in that. Yeah. And I really should be in that. And I think you'll have a lot of these players having sort of mini panics. I do wonder about...
Give us some examples, Andy. I think it's a really good thing. You're really pressed on, these are human beings, but they want to represent their country. There's a World Cup coming up. And it's totally understandable that they are starting to think like this.
Yeah, I think Brahim Diaz at Real Madrid is one as well. You think I'm a player who could be in a lot of top clubs in Europe, and I'm not in this one. Nicholas Jackson has already made his move. So having made a move to try and get more games, he's realised that he's in the same universe as Harry Kane, which is going to make it very, very tough.
If that was the point of his move, it was one of the dumbest moves ever, wasn't it? Because we know that Kane is implacably available.
But it has been sold to him that the two of them could play together. I think there's theory and practice.
Particularly with the former Serge Gnabry this season, that was never going to happen, was it?
I think, funnily enough, Gnabry might have been one of those players if we're talking about this time last year, actually. But he's definitely not now. He's playing himself out of a hole at the moment. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But there are plenty of players out there who I think will shape the January transfer market, because they will be thinking, I need something to happen now. So if we're talking about Alexander Isak, who we might mention again later, Johan Wieser, players like that, really forcing moves, I think we'll get players that you don't expect really forcing moves, maybe only temporary moves, but moves nevertheless once it gets to the winter.
I think it's actually a very good reflection on modern players that so many of them still want to play for their country. And if that means kicking up a bit of a row with their club, one way or another, that's I think, international football has been squeezed in the programme a little bit, and the all-encompassing club competition, all the rest of it. But the players are still very proud to pull on those shirts.
Absolutely, Danny. And I think you're looking at it's so easy to say that, like in the modern world, club football is all that matters. Well, I have to tell you that most players who can play for their country don't feel like that, even if their club coaches do. And lots of them, we talked about, Mateta would do anything to play for France, and, that will be the case. And he will be trying until the bitter end, until Deschamps picks his squad and says, you are not in it to get in that squad.
Then you get fans who say, I don't care about England, I only care about my club. Wait till England are a goal down 15 minutes to go in the quarter-final and see what's going on in your living room. That's all I'll say to you, when they're saying, for God's sake, get Kane off, he can't play every game, I wanted you to tell me about Jackson Irvine, because the player is little known to me. Obviously, Sam Pauli, back in the top level in Germany, shares a city with Hamburg, and while Hamburg have the Champions League or the European Cup on their CV, St. Pauli goes around the world in a different way. They're a cultural club, traditionally left-wing supported club, associated with the docks there in Hamburg when there was such a thing, and all of your punk rockers support St. Pauli. That's how it works. Tell us about Jackson Irvine.
Well, that's it. The brand is bigger than the club, really, in many ways, because they're such a countercultural icon. Yeah. And that is why they and Jackson Irvine have been the perfect marriage, really. He's been their captain for a while, since they're in the second tier. And it's because he's someone who is seen to embody the values of the club. He's the coolest footballer in the world, basically, not just a good player from Australia.
He's Australian, long hair, moustache, the full 1970s yacht rock look.
Tats. He's the sort of person that if you went to get your hair cut in Hamburg, he would be doing it for you, basically, after arriving on his motorcycle. And you look at him as well, and he's a player with a social conscience, and actually that is where the root of this, what's bound him to St. Pauli, is what's caused this current difficulty. Now he's out injured at the moment, so he's working on his fitness, but there's been a bit of a wedge placed between player and club since he was snapped, and he's often snapped wearing clothes because he's a very cool guy and does photo shoots and all this sort of stuff. He was snapped wearing a Palestine football shirt, and he was proud to do so, but because of the context of pro-Palestine support in Germany, it was seen by some people as anti-Semitic, and he was invited to explain himself. He didn't explain himself to the satisfaction of many. He didn't go far enough in denying that. And there's no suggestion, by the way, that he has been anti-Semitic in any way, shape, or form.
But it's obviously the whole thing is a much more delicate conundrum in Germany.
In Germany,
it is. For obvious reasons.
Absolutely. But it was interesting. After while he's been out injured, obviously he's continued doing his off-pitch stuff, and there's no suggestion that not modelling would make him get fit quicker. But obviously, certain fans see things in certain ways. Now, under one of his Instagram posts of one of his photo shoots a couple of months ago, there was a comment that said, "No one is bigger than the club. This is our club, not yours. You'll be gone in a few months, playing somewhere else for a year or more. We'll always be here, while you'll be nothing more than a footnote." That would hurt anyway, I think.
Yeah. Bloody fans, Andy.
A board member wrote that. A board member called Rene Bourne wrote that. Now, he withdrew the comment, apologised quite a lot to Jackson Irvine and his wife, who was involved in the shoot. And his wife went public on this. Now, St. Pauli citizens have said, look, social media mudslinging is not good for anyone. So if everyone could avoid it, that would be great. But interestingly, during the international break, Jackson Irvine has given an interview with ABC in Australia, and he talked about it. And he talked about how hurtful it was. Presumably, after being asked the question directly, I've only seen a snippet of the interview, but I guess it rather underlines that once he gets back to fitness, reintegrating a player who in some ways completely embodies St. Pauli might be quite difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I hadn't known much about Jackson until you started talking about him in our all-encompassing meeting that precedes these programmes. But I now say hello to fans of Celtic, Kilmarnock, Ross County, Burton Albion, Hull and Hibernian, all of whom have been graced by Jackson's presence in the past. How have I missed this? This is a great story. How the hell have I missed this? Of course, he's played nearly 80 times for Australia as well. Thank you very much indeed for that, Andy. This second hour is going faster even than the first hour of Trans-Europe Express. It's like we've hit warp speed. It's almost dizzying. Next up, we'll talk about everything that's been going on in Italy. Yeah, let's talk about Italy next, Andy. 2 weeks ago, Daniele Fisichella came on the show and was giving us chapter and verse, bless him, on the controversy surrounding the San Siro, one of the great cathedrals of world football, if these days a little bit frayed around the edges, I think it's fair to say.
A little.
And there was a crucial, hasn't even got any escalators if you're or lifts. If you're an old geezer with a bad knee like me, you've got to walk up there and round and round and round that kind of Krypton factor staircase that gets you up to the upper levels of what is a pretty tall stadium, by the way. There was a crucial council meeting in Milan to decide what was going to happen, whether it would lead to both clubs leaving the centre of the city and building separate new stadia in the outskirts, or something other. The meeting went on till the middle of the night. It was 4:00 before the councillors came to a decision. Can you give us an update, Andy, on what's actually been decided?
Yeah, that's right. So at the start of last week, it was decided that that they will be allowed to develop the San Siro. And when I say develop,
and the area around the stadium,
which is really important. As we said before, it's not a particularly well off quarter of the city. There's been great investment in other parts of Milan, but not that. And just because it's a monument of world football doesn't mean it should be allowed to turn into the Acropolis. You know, basically, there's no doubt that the future for most Italian clubs of size is to own their own stadium, which very few do. Of course, this allowed Juventus to build really such an impressive run of success by basically building a stadium that wasn't even that big. You know, it's only a touch over 40,000.
Yeah.
But being able to own it, to monetize it, all of that really mattered, and it really helped them get in front and stay in front for a long time until the whole Cristiano Ronaldo thing and signing all those players on frees and massive contracts. But anyway, I think if we look at Milan and Inter specifically, for them to be able to share the cost, of course, some will argue that's only half the profits, is really important for their financial future. Is really important for them to keep building. Both of them coming out of fairly delicate financial positions in recent years in very different ways, of course. And I think to provide something worthy of going to football in the 21st century, the San Siro looks beautiful. It is not a comfortable experience.
Nope.
And for a lot of people, it's a terrible view as well. So look, enjoy it for the last couple of years it's there. For people saying it should just stay how it is forever, come on. You know, you can't continue to exist on the past. It's not Italia 90 anymore.
I mean, so many English fans will probably share this experience I've been through. I love the old White Hart Lane. I adored it. My blood, my sweat, my emotional tears and my money were in that stadium. And it will never leave my heart, the sight of watching football from, in my time, 4 different sides of that ground. But I love the new stadium as well. And I also understand the reason why it's been built. And, you know, all of that. Just let me absolutely get this straight. So will the council continue to own the San Siro when it's rebuilt?
No, they're selling the stadium and the land to Milan and Inter. They're going to knock it down
Jointly.
And they're going to rebuild.
Okay.
And they're going to provide a load of sort of enabling development, I guess we would call it in this country, to actually provide for people around there. So I think that's hugely important, and bringing jobs into a community like that is massively important as well. If we step away from football for a second,
no, and we've seen in certain areas in England how the building of a new football stadium, because football is so huge in certain parts of Europe, actually does drag behind it the local community, jobs, money, opportunity, catering, and all the rest of it. AC Milan have also got a plan, of course, as well as for Stadia. They've got a plan for their team. And perhaps surprisingly, given the way things were even 6 months ago, Fikayo Tomori looks like he's going to get a new contract in Milan.
Yeah, they're very keen to get him locked up. He's got 2 years left, so that they really want to get this one sorted out. Look, he's been there since 2021. They've been enormously happy with him most of the time. He dropped out of the team for a stage last season, but funnily enough, when they were trying to sell him last winter, if there's someone who they've got to thank, or he's got to thank, if he signs this new deal and becomes, to all intents and purposes, a Milan lifer. I say that, he's still only 27, of course. Maybe the person he thanks is Sergio Conceição, who was only there for 6 months in a Super Cup and that massive cigar. because Conceição fought tooth and nail, and that is a considerable force, by the way, because he's quite a frightening man, to keep him at the club when they wanted to sell him last winter. And really, that is something that has started to rehabilitate Tomori. Now, you look at the start of this season, so many people have been talking about Ruben Loftus-Cheek at Milan, of course, and understandably so, because he has been recalled to the England squad after his absence, and he's a valuable presence around the squad. Thomas Tuchel certainly feels that. He's a valuable presence around the Milan squad. He's not in their best 11. Tomori is. And in 6 league games this season, after they conceded those 2 in the opening day to Cremonese and that shock defeat, 5 league games since, they've conceded 1 goal. And he has been absolutely fantastic for them in that time. I guess the one fly in the ointment is, I realise that, Milan will be sitting there going, well, market forces, wages aren't what they used to be or whatever. They're offering him more years on the same money as he's currently getting. If I was his agent, I wouldn't be thrilled with that, if I'm being perfectly honest. But that's what's being widely reported at the moment, that he's been offered. And he's paid pretty well, £3.5 million a year, but still, and those are net figures, by the way. They're always giving us net figures in Italy, not gross figures. Yeah. So we're talking about 7 million euros, so about £5.8 million after tax in Premier League money, which is a fair old chunk, I suppose. But still.
Very quickly, Andy, because we're running out of time. I don't have to always be right on this show, because I've got my Spurs podcast where I'm always right, and the View from the Lane. But I've been predicting for about 18 months now, because of things I see in the way the shape of the games is changing, the return of 2 up front. Who could have guessed that it would be an old school manager like Max Allegri who says, I might go for that?
Yeah. Who'd have thought? Look, it's interesting because Milan I'm thinking of Max Allegri. Juve, Igor Tudor, it is, of course. Juve now. Yeah. So he is rather a more ballsy sort of tactician, I think. It's
to use the correct phrase, yes.
Yeah, he's an entertainer, and they've started the season pretty well. Juventus still unbeaten in the league, of course, but given the enviable attacking talent they've got, they've not quite clicked at the top end. Now, we talked about Lo Cepeda has not quite found his way in. Jonathan David, only 1 goal so far. Now, David and Openda have played together in the Champions League against Borussia Dortmund, but despite that flurry of goals at the end that got them a draw, it wasn't really a resounding success. So it looks like Dusan Vlahovic, who they were trying to get rid of to anyone in the summer, was trying to offer himself to anyone in the summer, but it's going to stay there for the last year of his contract. Him and David could be playing together up front going forward. I'm really interested to see how that works out. And obviously that could squeeze playing time for Francisco Conceição and Eden Jagrova. So you're never going to keep all the people happy all of the time.
No, and that's the way football works, isn't it? They were convinced that Vlahovic was a busted flush and they wanted to get rid of him. He's come back this year and played very well, so they've now got 1 forward more than they planned to have, and everything else is flowing from that. Thank you very much indeed, Andy. I think this show might be setting a record for the fastest 2 hours on radio ever, and there's still 60 minutes of this award-winning stuff to come, including, of course, Tim Vicker from South America, and Andy will be telling us all about Schalke's return to near the top of the Bundesliga. That's all coming up very, very soon here on Trans-Europe Express.
Hamilton, now at Ferrari, dares to dream of a record 8th F1 world title. The Tifosi will be hoping the Brits can bring glory back to Italy. To many, Ferrari and Formula One are inseparable. They're the only team in the sport today to have competed in the first World Championship in 1950, are the most successful team in history, and have built some absolutely gorgeous cars. Their first driver's title was won in 1952 by Alberto Ascari. Considered one of F1's most dominant and best-loved champions, he drove the iconic Ferrari 500 and defended his title the year after. It was Juan Manuel Fangio in his Ferrari 250 who secured the team's next driver's title in 1956. Remember, he was world champion 5 times with 4 different teams. Mike Hawthorne, Phil Hill and John Surtees also won titles for Ferrari in the 50s and 60s, and the cars back then were beautiful, and they even sounded great, didn't they? Anyway, Ferrari went 11 years without winning a title until Niki Lauda won in 1975 in the iconic 312T. Throughout much of the 80s and 90s, though, Ferrari looked like they'd never go all the way again. Le Professeur Alain Prost came pretty close in 1990, but lost out to his bitter rival and former teammate at McLaren, Ayrton Senna. It was only when John Todt recruited a swathe of staff from outside of Italy, including Michael Schumacher, that the glory days returned 21 years after their last driver's title. The turn of the century saw the prancing horse sprint to an unprecedented 5 consecutive championship doubles. And after Schumacher left, Kimi Raikkonen reclaimed the driver's title immediately. But despite employing 1,500 people, the Iceman remains the last Ferrari world champion. So, 16 constructors' titles, 7 more than McLaren, and 15 drivers' titles, 4 more than, again, McLaren. Ferrari are truly Formula One's top team. Forza Ferrari.
Yeah, welcome back to the third and final hour of tonight's edition of Trans-Europe Express with me, Danny Kelly, and Andy Brassell. What fun we're having, despite the lack of club football across the continent in this second international break. Got a lot to get through in this last hour. We'll be talking about everything that's been going on in France, including issues with the TV deal, but mostly the madness that's surrounding Monaco just now. Andy will then tell us about his team focuses Schalke. For so long, a huge club in Germany, then relegated, now second in the Bundesliga. He's been and interviewed their manager. I think it was here in Ireland, actually. We'll talk about that a little later. And then we'll take you through some of the countries we have and some of the remarkable matches we haven't yet talked about in this international break, including, I think, one of the most remarkable stats I've ever stumbled across involving Austria. That's all coming up very, very soon here on Trans-Europe Express. But before any of that, and of course as traditional 11 o'clock here on Trans-Europe Express every Sunday evening, we need to go to South America to join our South American correspondent, our football czar, and our friend Tim Vickery. Hi, Tim.
Evening, gentlemen. I was paying attention there during the news, and it seems that Oliver Glasner is here to stay. And I would rather be anywhere else than Thornton Heath right now. How you doing, gentlemen? You all right?
Very, very good indeed. Thank you, Tim. Listen, I was gonna ask you a general question first about how the South American teams have been getting on in this international break. They're all playing friendlies in the far-flung corners of the world. But I've got to be more specific than that. South Korea went 16 games in their qualifier. The Asian qualification is pretty tough. They were unbeaten in all of those. So the result that made my eyes pop this week was South Korea, unbeatable, 0. Brazil, knackered, no good anymore, 5. Amazing result.
Indeed, yes. Recalibrate your World Cup expectations.
Absolutely, I've already done it.
Indeed. They do usually turn South Korea over, and they beat them heavily in the last World Cup. And there in Seoul, in the build-up to the last World Cup, they won 5-1 with a spate of goals late in the game. But this was different, and this was goals all through the game, in control from first to last. And it was very, very impressive. Really impressive stuff from Carlo Ancelotti's people. He took over knowing he had problems. I mean, you all remember, Danny, the game when they were just blitzed by Argentina, last game under the previous coach, 4-1. Yeah. They were lucky to get one. Argentina were unlucky to get only 4. And there were 2 problems. No balance between attack and defence, so Argentina just walked through their midfield, and the attack was so predictable. With the same basic formation, because so far he's kind of kept a 4-2-4, and one of those 2 is Casemiro. With the same formation, he's just got things totally different. And he is a class act, and you can see...
He's a great manager.
Some of the things he says, he's just latched onto the problems. Something he said this week was, I've no interest in anyone going to the World Cup who's thinking in terms of being voted the best player in the world. Don't want it. That's a little message to Vinny.
Hello, Neymar.
Yeah, but also to Vinny, because Neymar at the moment is out of contention.
Miles off it, yeah.
Vinny is very, very much in contention, and the whole thing last year about not winning the Ballon d'Or threw him. Actually, Brazil lost points because of it, because they let him take a penalty, which he missed, when Rafinha had only scored 2 penalties in the previous game. Absolute madness. So that's a little message to Vinny. What we want is collectivity. So in order to balance this out defensively, you're going to have to work back, son. And so they're working back. They're much more cohesive. And another thing he wanted to do with Vinny, what he saw with the way that they had been playing, is just, they get the ball out to Vinny, left wing. It's so predictable. All of the opposing defence is waiting for him. So what are we going to do? We're going to move him around a little bit. We're going to have... in this game, it was Rodrigo back for his first game for a while. So him and Vinny can flit around. There's mobility there. And he's got Esteban as well. Esteban with Chelsea. Ancelotti gave him his first start in his first game. And I think this lad, I just don't think he has a ceiling. I've no idea what this lad is going to produce. Bruno Guimaraes, who had put a little bit more structure there. So the roles now are more defined. They have a mechanism for playing the ball out from defence that they didn't have before. The big question mark is still, how often can you play this with just Casemiro and Bruno in midfield? They ended the game with Lucas Paquetá there as well. So you had a 3. And the World Cup, and you don't win it in the easy games. You win it getting through the difficult games. So that's something that he's going to have to look at. I think especially in March when they take over on some European opponents with friendlies that will have a little bit more World Cup intensity about them. He's going to have a greater look at how the side is going to work with 3 in the midfield. But it was very, very encouraging. It was a really, really good display. He had everyone singing off the same song sheet. You looked at that attacking firepower, and when they're all firing together, you're thinking, how many defences are going to relish playing against that?
Tim, talking of Esteval and talking of young players who really catch the imagination, it was interesting to see earlier this week, no less than Francesco Totti going, I'm not interested in any of the young players that Italy are producing at the moment. I'm interested in Nico Paz, who, of course, has been shining for Como out in Serie A for, going on a year and a half now since making that move from Real Madrid. They did very well to hang on to him this summer. No Thiago Almada for Argentina as they're out in the States. Nico Paz played instead. How did he do? And does this change the hierarchy at all?
No, he didn't do very well. They beat Venezuela 1-0 in Miami. Lo Celso, late of our parish, Dan, scored the goal. I think there's a problem with him. I wonder if he's dynamic enough, especially the hole that you're trying to fit him into really is Di Maria. And Di Maria is only not playing because he retired from international football. after the
You're always trying to unretire him, aren't you?
Well, I think half of Argentina would now try and unretire him because he's 11 games into this comeback now in Argentine football with Rosario Central. They're unbeaten. He's flying, the club is flying, and you can feel the pressure build in Argentina. You know, come back, all is forgiven. Paz at the moment, he's still struggling a little bit, and I just wonder if he's dynamic enough. Maybe they started playing him outright. He ended up, when Simeone came on to give them some width, he ended up moving infield to the centre. But no, they gave him the full 90 and he didn't really convince. And he hasn't so far. They've got a game Tuesday against Puerto Rico, for all that's worth. So maybe he'll build up some confidence and momentum then. But so far with Nico Paz and Argentina, not yet.
What's the plan with regards to Lionel Messi? Because I noticed that Christian Romero captained the team. Will Messi just automatically come back into the squad and take over the captaincy again? Of course, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's entirely up to him. He'll do whatever he wants to do. And Di Maria is in the same position. And Scaloni, the coach, said, the day he wants to come back, he can come back. And it's entirely that with Messi. There is still no definitive word about whether he's going to play the World Cup or not, and all the signs are that he will. And it works in a lot of people's interests, I think, to have a look at alternatives. The best football that they've played recently, and Messi is still a genius and still does wonderful things, but that Brazil game, there was no Messi there, and that was Almada and Julian Alvarez firing together, and now they're playing together at Atletico Madrid, although Almada's out injured. That's such a promising little partnership. But Messi will be the captain if he wants to, for as long as he wants to. Okay, then let's move on then to, I know, one of your favourite tournaments, although I think sometimes right now a little bit undermined by the fact that the countries couldn't demand the best under 20-year-old footballers, but the World Cup for under 20s continues apace down your neck of the woods. How's that going?
Yeah, you're right. I think that there needs to be a rethink on this. I mean, because there is no obligation on clubs to release players, and because of the changes in the game, both with the quality of pitches and the protection for talent, it means that so many 18, 19-year-olds are vital players for their clubs and are not getting released. So you end up a little bit thinking, is this competition still fit? Does it matter who wins and who doesn't win? And Uruguay, the reigning champions, and it looked like a very good side. Not one of those players has really come through from the side that won 2 years ago. So you do wonder, but it's there, and it's been played in Chile, and we have the certainty of a South American team in the final. Brazil, as we discussed last week, went out in the group phase. Not a huge surprise because they're big and strong and poor. In a very, very strong group. So they went. Chile, the hosts, just got massacred by a very good Mexico side. Paraguay lost to Norway, who had one shot on target in 120 minutes and have got a terrific goalkeeper. But I wouldn't pay money to see them again. Leaving us with Argentina and Colombia, who will meet on Wednesday in Santiago in the semi-final. Now, Argentina, there's no Echeverri, who was the star of the side in qualification. There's no Mastroantuono, who obviously Real Madrid haven't released. They've picked up some injuries along the way, but they've still got some players. The one I like best, he's only just come on in the last couple of games, but a striker called Silvetti, who's just been signed by Inter Miami from Newell's Old Boys. That's a sign of the times. But there's plenty of good little ball players there. There's a nice little generation. Colombia are physically stronger with a terrific centre forward, Villarreal. He's a little bit wayward, and he took time to fire, but in the last two games, he's banged in 5 goals. They played a terrific quarter-final against Spain. They won it 3-2. He scored all 3 of them. But what else did he do? Absolutely stupidly, he picked up a second yellow card and got himself suspended. So he won't be there when Colombia cross the road to face Argentina on Wednesday in the semi-final. I suspect that without him, Argentina are probably favourites, although Colombia are strong and physical. How many of these players, are any of these players going to be in contention for the World Cup next year? I can't see. Colombia centre forward and Villarreal, maybe they've got a good goalkeeper as well, and Colombian goalkeeping isn't in the greatest of health, so maybe there'll be one or two. But I think more for this generation will be thinking of 2030. There's been some terrific games. One thing that I don't enjoy is there's no VAR, which I do quite enjoy that. But instead, the coaches can make these challenges. So you've got two in the game, and if your challenge is upheld, you keep it. And that means what happens at the end of the game when you're winning? When there's drama and you want the game to be speeded up, the coach will use his challenge just to speed the game down, just to slow the game down. I really, really hope this is an idea that doesn't catch on.
Okay, listen, thank you very, very much indeed. As always, Tim Vicker, for the latest from South America, including that brilliant win for Brazil, who looked fantastic. Of course, it's a friendly and all the rest. I totally get that. But from where they were before Ancelotti took over, i.e. totally chaotic and absolutely easy to beat, you can already see gigantic process, and they will be soon starting to think that they can win the World Cup as well. When we come back in a few minutes' time, we'll be taking another trip through everything that's happening in football in France, and some of it is just fantastic. You'll enjoy it very much indeed. Yeah, just a note here to you all before we move on to football in France this week. In the United States today, Miami beat Atlanta United by 4-0. It was yet another party for the Barcelona old boys. Jordi Alba got one of the goals. Lionel Messi got 2 of them. Luis Suarez got one of them. Sergio Busquets must be absolutely kicking himself that he didn't score to make it an all Barcelona party. But that was Luis Suarez's 600th career goal. Quite amazing when you think about it. 600 career goals for Luis Suarez, still going strong there for Miami. Andy, let's talk about France yet. And I guess we could call it movement in Monty. I'll call it madness in Monaco. We've been noting that the normal order of events in southern France is that Marseille provide us with all the hilarity.
Yes.
But in the last few weeks, they have been notably well organised and quiet, and Monaco said, hold my beret, and here they go.
Yeah, and, I think because of Marseille, and to a lesser extent Nice, I think we can think falsely of Monaco as the stable one down there in southern France. But look, it's somewhere where there's a lot of money involved, so there's always a lot of pressure. There's royal involvement as well as Russian billionaire involvement.
Yeah.
And, the coach is always just a couple of results away from getting binned. And that's what happened to Adi Hütter this week. Of course, they'd started the Champions League campaign quite badly. And then off the back of that, of course, they lost last weekend too. And Hütter has been close to getting the sack, probably about 4 times in the 2 years that he's been there. He finally did last week. They went out there and tried to get Edin Terzic to replace him, the former Borussia Dortmund coach. Terzic said no. So they've gone with Sebastian Pocognoli. Who's that, I hear you say? Well, young coach who's done really phenomenally well over the last little while. Took Union Saint-Gilloise to the Belgian league title last season, took them to a win on the first game of the season. And bear in mind, much like at Monaco, but with lesser resources, has been losing big players all along the way. And, that will, I think, kind of make him settled at Monaco, because that is what happens at Monaco. You lose big players to big clubs, and you just have to get on with it and continue being successful. With that said, the money at Monaco will be greater, but so will the pressure. And Pocognoli is still quite a young coach. So he's taking a risk doing this. I don't think there's any doubt about that. There's responsibility, not just to get results, but to develop young players who you then sell on for a lot of money. And those are 2 things that are quite hard to reconcile. And there are a few clubs really where there is that sort of pressure. I suppose Benfica would be another one. And there are reasons why Jorge Mendes has been involved to greater and lesser extents at these clubs, because there are young players of quality to sell, and that is very much part of the contract. But picking Monaco up and putting them in a position where they are definitely top 3, that is the bare minimum from here, and that they do a little bit better in the Champions League this season. That's really important, and they've not had the greatest starts. And there are a few big losses. Now, of course, they've taken on some players who that they hope will add to it with experience. Now, Ansu Fati, despite not arriving there fit, goal scoring wise, has done pretty well. He's the fastest Monaco player ever to 5 goals, which may sound like a small thing, but when you've been as struggling for fitness and form for him as for as long a time as he has, then that's good. Eric Dyer has been a great add on and off the pitch, but of course, there's a kind of shadow.
Of course, watching all of this from the touchline, and I mean the touchline, I don't want to say it's the ghost of Paul Pogba, because that's unfair on him. It's Paul Pogba. Still no appearances.
No, and he was expected to make his debut immediately after the international break. Now, this was one of the things that Hütter, knowing that he was probably about to lose his job, was having to answer, when's Pogba playing? When's Pogba playing? When's Pogba playing? And he said, well, look, we'd hope to have him back for the derby against Nice, which was the one immediately before the international break. We will have him back for the game against Angers immediately following. And you think, okay, that's something he could do, play 20 minutes in that, one of the weaker teams in the division. The news came through this week that he's suffered a thigh injury. And so he's not going to be available for that. And again, we don't know when he is going to be available for that. And immediately, with what's happened to Pogba, not just off the pitch, because that's a big deal as well, of course, and we don't want to minimise that. What he's been through off the pitch has been awful.
Yeah.
And that's before we get to, we're talking about personally, we're not talking about the drug ban, by the way. And then on top of that, you look at the recurrent injuries, which maybe led him down that road in the first place. You've got an issue where every time he pulls up injured now, people are going to start asking, I think justifiably, is he ever going to come back?
Yeah. It is notable as well that so long as this all been going on now, that one of the people, and what you're talking about is his personal problems away from the drugs, is that he had that blackmail extortion case. One of the people who got put away for that has now been released. Because good behaviour. The French legal system is not for me to comment on. But just goes to show how long this stresses and strains, some of them self-inflicted, some of them nature, and some of them are caused by other people, have been going on. Perhaps not as high profile as Monaco, Andy, but plenty of tension at Rennes now as well.
Yeah, and Rennes are another club which I think people can underestimate just how big they are, because they've been out there since they qualified for the Champions League, going back to the year of COVID. So it's a fair while now, 5 years. They've been really struggling to get back to that level. They've been through a load of coaches. They've spent a lot on players. Of course, they've sold players going along the way. And they made big signings again this summer, including Esteban Lepol, Brelin Bolo of Switzerland. And they're now coached by Abid Bey, who came in towards the back end of last season. This is his first full crack at it. And remarkably, considering they've had two real prestige wins against Marseille and Lyon, they've also had, which both carried a fair share of luck, it must be added. Yeah. They've had some really difficult moments. And it kind of feels that no one thinks that Abid Bey is in danger of getting sacked just yet, but it's being repeatedly reported that the players are having difficulty understanding what he means. And also the fact that he called a meeting between the players to talk about recent bad results and bad performances, and the players still didn't get it. And that's a real concern. And I think especially when you've got two real leaders in the dressing room in Brice Samba and Seko Fofana, guys who are experienced, guys who people listen to, and they're struggling to connect to the coach, it seems, particularly Fofana, who is giving everything on the pitch, but they're really struggling tactically to get the best out of him. You know, this was a guy who loads of Premier League clubs would have wanted a year and a half ago before he went to Saudi, and can score a lot of goals from midfield. But when your key players are underperforming, and when your players with the biggest potential are underperforming, you've got a massive problem. They look a mess at the moment.
Yeah, we'll watch that one with great interest. But as you say, the big news this week is that Adi Hutter has been shown at the door by Monaco and replaced by Pocagnoli, who did so well with Union Saint-Gilloise. But there is a big leap between the Belgian League and Ligue 1. We'll keep an eye on that as well here on Trans-Europe Express, where next we'll be focusing on a club that people forget was the biggest club in Germany before Bayern Munich ascended, and remain one of the hugest clubs in Central Europe. We'll talk about Schalke in our team focus next. Yeah, massive NFL action for you later this morning, where you can listen to the Detroit Lions against Kansas City Chiefs live on talkSPORT 2 after our show from just after 1 o'clock in the morning. A huge game this. The Lions are off to a brilliant start in the NFL season. Kansas City, one of the absolute favourites for the title, can't afford really another defeat. It will be a huge setback for them if they lose. A massive game, live NFL on talkSPORT 2 from just after 1 a.m. Now then, our club focuses on Schalke. I never tire of telling people that before Bayern Munich, if you can stretch your mind back as far as that, the big club in what was then West Germany and Germany was Schalke. They've had leaner times recently, but are now very much back in the top level of football in Germany. And Andy, you've been to some bizarre part of the world to see them play this week.
That's right. A quick little day trip over to Dublin, as I was saying earlier, to see Schalke play a friendly at Bohemians. And
what fun, Andy.
As you were expecting, Bohemians is a terrific place to go and see football. Schalke left behind a lot of big players because the Bundesliga 2 is their big fish at the moment, obviously trying to get back up to the top flight. So no Loris Karius, no Timo Becker, no Armin Younes, a few players taken for extra match practice, etc., etc. But a productive time they had there apparently, and the fact that those fans, and there were plenty of Schalke fans over there at Delimant Park, singing Schalke International because they're back in Europe. Because, of course, we remember them being in the Champions League in relatively recent times, but a lot of bad things have happened to the club since.
I mean, sorry, but a slip of the tongue. Of course, they're doing very well in the second tier, as you exactly say, Andy. But just remind people the size of the stadium, the historic success, and what's happened to them since, where a mixture of financial issues, sponsorship problems have left them, in a league that they are clearly, and no one deserves to be in the top league, but they're far too big to be in it.
Yeah, that they are. And, let's go back to, I guess, 2019 when Domenico Tedesco got fired. He's currently at Fenerbahce, of course. When he got fired, it was off the back of them losing 7-0 to Manchester City in the Champions League. That's not that long ago, is it? No. And since then, they've been through more managers than we've been through co-presenters in a decade. And it's remarkable, really, everything that's happened to them since. Now, look, COVID hit them very hard, like it hit a lot of clubs very hard. It hit them particularly hard because they were a massive club and they were overspending for a long time. They were paying crazy wages on players. They lost players like Leon Goretzka for free, which was a huge problem to them, of course, as well. And then off the back of that, they sort of put in a $2.5 million a year salary ceiling. That has come down since, because since then you had the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They were still sponsored by Gazprom at that point. So not only were they leaking money, but there was a lot of moral pressure on them to remove Gazprom. Look, they came out and said, well, this is Gazprom Germany. This is nothing to do with Russia.
Yeah, but nobody was buying that. Yeah,
that's not flying with anyone.
No.
So that they lost that, which was a big issue for them as well. They were seriously creaking at that point. And of course, Sporting's unsuccess costs you a lot of money as well. So they were relegated in 2021 after a horrendous start to the season in which they didn't win in the first 31 games, equally in a Bundesliga record. They went without a win for 31 games across 2 seasons, which was a Bundesliga record. And then they came back up after a season, but it was so costly coming back up as well as they did in 2022. And they weren't prepared for it at all because they'd got through so many coaches. By the time they came back up, they were paying the 3 previous coaches as well as the current one. So that was them in a dreadful financial position. They went straight back down, really bad start. And there were some huge coaches who failed there. So we talked about Tedesco, Thomas Reis, who after a really bad start to 23-24, I think it was, he was fired. He has since gone to the Turkish Super League and qualified Samsunspor for European competition, which is no mean feat at all. They had Karel Gerets, who didn't succeed there either in the second division after he did a brilliant job with Union.
Still getting massive crowds though.
Yeah, they were. And, this has always been the case. A little bit like FC Köln. No matter how bad the team are, they will always sell out the stadium. And stadium-wise, obviously, if you've been to the Arena auf Schalke, as it is outside sponsorship reasons, is the Veltins for sponsorship reasons. If you look at them in terms of average crowds and number of members, you're looking at the 6th biggest club in the world. Over 200,000 members, and they're getting 60,000 plus every single week.
Now, listen, fans of Plymouth might want to open their ears. Fans of Liverpool might want to close theirs because the manager, of course, when Plymouth beat Liverpool in the FA Cup not so very long ago, was Myron Muslic, and he's now turned up at Schalke. And Andy caught up with him yesterday after his side's 3-2 loss to Bohemians in Dublin.
You got to play with Schalke in an international context for the first time. How do you feel?
Fantastic. Thank you very much, first of all, for the hospitality. Received very welcome, open, helpful in every situation we faced. A wild game with a wild result. It fits somehow to the last 2 days here in Dublin. It fits to the city. It fits to this country. So it was a beautiful experience, and we are grateful for it.
And it's been an incredible season, really, so far. I mean, did days like this show you exactly why you joined this club? I mean, people here was surprised that you left Plymouth, but there's really only one choice when Schalke.
Of course, it's unbelievable hard to resist. We had today an international test game in Dublin, and we had around 2,500 supporters from Gelsenkirchen, from Schalke. That just shows the love for the club, but that also shows how big Schalke is. So I think we're in a very good way.
Before you come, can you have any real idea how big the club is? So when you take charge of your first home game, for example, what do you like?
I was like, okay, this is proper. Playing in front of 62,000, every single home game is sold out. Then that's a giant. But on the other side, it's a huge privilege to be the gaffer here.
So what's gone right so far this season? Because obviously we remember Schalke from the Champions League in relatively recent seasons. A lot has gone wrong of late. What has gone right for you to be in second place so far?
I think a lot of things. First of all, we stabilized the club. We gave the club, the team, a completely new organization, a new structure, a new spirit, a new confidence. And this was the start, and from there on we move on step by step.
Because you get lots of big teams, really big teams and big clubs who get stuck in Bundesliga slide. So what do you have to do to break that cycle, I suppose? Because Hamburg, for example, just gone up after 7 years in the second.
For sure, very similar like the Championship, a super competitive league with a lot of teams with the same desire, but we go step by step.
So do you think the Championship has given you some sort of idea of the intensity and exactly how many teams want to get into the Bundesliga and how different?
Yeah, 100%.
Listen, Andy, first of all, that was great. And I also love the fact that he thought you had laid on the hospitality in Dublin for him, which I thought was pretty brilliant too.
Guinness is on me.
Not a city in the world where you have to look very hard for hospitality. I think it is fair to say. Look, he looked, obviously, he's got that great hair and beard. He looks absolutely great there. And he talks like a man who knows that he has got a gigantic football club under him here. Not as well resourced they would like to be, but the emotional resource of 62,000 people there in the Rhine every second week should be enough. And of course, we would have said this about Cologne and Hamburg in the past as well, to see them back into the top level of German football. What was the vibes you got from him that this is likely to happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think we can say likely when it comes to Schalke because they've had such lean years. But there's definitely a different feeling around the club this season. I think Muslic really helps with that. I think when you bear in mind when he originally arrived to Plymouth, who were in a bad state at the bottom of the Championship, bad enough that despite the success in the FA Cup, he couldn't help them avoid relegation, of course. But he's someone who really galvanises. He's a really engaging speaker. Players really respond to him, I think, and doing those basics is super important at Schalke. You know, I think to play for a club like that with that sort of pressure that's intrinsic from having 62,000 there every week, it's not about being the best team. It's not about challenging Bayern or anything like that. You know, the Schalke fans aren't expecting that. What they are expecting is a team that's brave enough to play in front of those fans and brave enough to be able to take on the mantle of really representing such a big club. As we said, and as we were saying in conversation, the pressure at Hamburg, the different ways that they managed to avoid getting promoted for so many seasons while they were still ignoring your emails about the clock, was amazing. But Schalke haven't been that close. They haven't really been anywhere near promotion since they went down the last time. And they've needed to stabilise. They've needed to regroup. And they've needed someone to come in who says, right, okay, we haven't got that much. Let's start from the bottom. Let's work out not what we can't do, but what we can do. And I think you've seen that actually with Hamburg. If and when Schalke do go up, I think Hamburg, despite having a few difficult moments this season, are quite a good template to follow. Of course, they've had improved results in recent weeks. But having that humility to say, okay, we are a massive name in German football, but we can't expect to be challenging. We can't expect to be good. We can't expect to be European again straight away. And sometimes I think it's difficult to acknowledge a history and yet create a little bit of difference from it and sort of be humble, to be modest. But he's someone who does that very well, I think.
And I think it's very simple. And sometimes I think about Manchester United in the same way.
Agreed.
The fact that, look, the club is still the same, but everything changes around you. And so you have to adapt to that. And that does take a certain level of clear-sightedness and, as you say, humility. Just to finish off, and thank you for that. That was a great story. Thank you for going and get that interview as well. The top 5 in the second tier in Germany, very early in the season, they've all played 8 games, are covered by just 2 points. Elversberg, a very small club, are top with 19. Then Schalke. It must be very odd for Elversberg to think we're being hunted here by Schalke of all teams with 18, and then Darmstadt, Paderborn and Hanover 96 are all on 17 points. And we'll watch Bundesliga's Vi with great interest over the next 7 or 8 months here on Trans-Europe Express, where we're heading for the finishing line now. And we'll be talking about some of the other countries who've been involved in World Cup qualification that we haven't yet mentioned on Trans-Europe Express. Yeah, love that exposition there from Andy about Schalke. And if you want to see the imbalance between them and some of the clubs they're competing with, the team that are currently top of Bundesliga's VI are Elversborg. I've just done a bit of research. Their ground holds at a push 10,000. Schalke gets 62,000 rain or shine every fortnight into their massive stadium there in the Rhineland, in Gelsenkirchen. Of course, that's where they are. They'll be dancing in the streets of Gelsenkirchen tonight. Amazing story. Thank you, Andy, very much. Let's talk about some of these other club nations that we haven't spoken about so far with relation to World Cup qualification. The game that caught my eye during the week was when Austria ran up 10 goals against San Marino. Big deal. San Marino are the traditional whipping boys of European football. But, and listen to this, this can never have happened before in a big competitive match. All 10 of Austria's starting outfielders either scored or assisted, including Kevin Danso. All 10 of Austria's starting outfielders either scored a goal or got an assist in the course of the game, which is just delicious. Just roll that around your mouth. Sorry if you're a San Marino fan, but that's an incredible piece of teamwork, isn't it? So that was fantastic. Now, Andy,
it is.
We've already talked once about how the conflicts in the Middle East are affecting football. When we talked a little earlier, the game between Norway and Israel in the World Cup qualifiers was extremely charged politically because Norway are the FA that have called publicly for Israel, while things are the way they are, to be thrown out of world football, to be thrown out of the World Cup qualifiers. And of course, inevitably, they meet then in Oslo. And whether or not that affected the match, I don't know. What did affect the match is Erling Haaland, who, to his extraordinary start to the season, added yet another hat-trick as an ever-improving Norway side beat Israel by 5-0.
So I guess the remarkable thing on pitch is the fact that Haaland had a penalty early on, took it, missed it, was made to take it again because the goalkeeper moved, took it, missed it again, and then went on to score a hat-trick.
Yeah, amazing.
And so he's already got to his half century of international goals at 24. He scored 51 goals for Norway in 46 games. Just get your head around that. Now, look, I know people will say international football's not as strong as club football these days, blah, 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 blah.
But he's not playing in a stronger team either, as Manchester City. So it swings and roundabouts. It's an incredible stat. Yeah,
and he had a slow start for Norway as well. Betting in, I suppose, really reflective of his club career, where he didn't score a load of goals for Brino or Mulder before he turned up at Red Bull Salzburg and really took off from there, heading towards Borussia Dortmund. So, look, it's an absolutely remarkable record. And I think if you look at the quality of players around him, people looked at it and said, oh, it's just Haaland's team. And then it's like, oh, well, it's Haaland and Odegaard. And then you add Ryerson, Schelderup, all the other ones.
Anthony Nusa, yeah.
All of a sudden, you're getting a proper team. And I think the realisation has come over the last couple of match days that Italy just aren't catching them. Even improved under Rino Gattuso, they are just not catching them. So, look, Norway have got themselves into an absolutely incredible position. And, a lot of people will love to see them at the World Cup. But while we're talking of top scorers, I know we moved on from Austria and San Marino, and that was an absolutely great stat. The thing we have to add is if all of Austria was happy, not all of Austria was happy, Tony Polster wasn't happy.
Their legendary centre-forward,
The scorer, he said, teams like San Marino shouldn't be playing international football. I'm sure it's entirely coincidental that Marko Arnautovic scored 4 goals of those 10 to eclipse Tony Polster's all-time scoring record for the Austrian national team. I mean, I did enjoy the timing of that comment from Tony Polster. And it's really interesting to see Arnautovic, someone who's had a really rich and interesting career, but basically has been thought of as a bit of a big head and a bit of a braggart, to see him cry in public actually twice over the last couple of months. Now, look, there's nothing wrong with sharing your emotions at all. But to see him, firstly, talk about when he arrived at Crvena Zvezda, Red Star Belgrade, for whom he's already scored in European competition, as we know, to say how he'd fulfilled a promise to his former coach, Sinisa Mihajlovic, the late Sinisa Mihajlovic, to go and play for them in Belgrade at some point. And then to see him fill up after reaching the Austrian goal-scoring record is someone who, when he was a teenager, because he was loud and a bit brash, was ridiculed, really. And I think you can compare him a little bit to Zlatan Ibrahimovic, not in terms of ability. I don't think there is a comparison there. And clearly Ibrahimovic has been there and done it all. But to be the child of immigrant parents and to really prove yourself and to be loved by the country where you grew up in, and probably you weren't treated that nicely when you were a kid, I think he's enormously important to that person. And I think you saw that at that moment.
No, well done to him. I mean, that's a great record to break. Andy, you've got about a minute to talk to me about two other Scandinavian nations, having talked about Norway. Sweden, who were expected to do well, imploding, and the Faroe Islands, so nobody had any expectations of, doing really well.
Yeah, so Sweden, that they had plenty of chances, didn't take any of them, went down 2-0 at home to Switzerland. So
disaster.
Yeah, they're not going to be at the World Cup, it looks like. And Alexander Isak, he got his move to Liverpool, but he also kind of played himself out of contention for some really important games for Sweden when they would have loved to have him. So I think that's made a massive difference, their qualifying campaign. In terms of the Faroes, what a story. I mean, they go and beat Montenegro in Mirko Vucinic's first game in charge as coach. Couldn't have gone much worse for him, the former Roma man, going down 4-0 in the Faroe Islands. And then Czechia went there today and went down 2-1. So two huge wins for the Faroe Islands. They could be looking at the playoffs.
Imagine if the Faroe Islands were in the World Cup. Be amazing, wouldn't it? I know if Infantino gets his way, every team will qualify for the World Cup very soon. But while there's still a competitive element to it, what an amazing story that would be. Andy, thank you so much for the last 3 hours. You've been fantastic. Thank you all for listening. Let me tell you in our poll, about 50% of you think that Spain are very likely to win the World Cup if England don't. It was a kind of gag, people. Coming up next here on talkSPORT is Outspoken with White and Jordan. I'll be back on H&J to talk about international football in just a few hours' time. Thank you all for listening, as I say. Till then, God bless you all and good night.